Yo, reading books to be a hassle, so we made a show. Gotta ace those finals, you know you gotta go. Plug in the headphones and let the knowledge flow. Cramcast on the go, it's the way to grow.
All right, so you know how we always say we love a good deep dive? Well, get ready because today's topic is a real doozy. We're tackling the nervous system.
Yeah, this one's incredible. I mean, talk about a complex system. It's literally running the show as we sit here talking right now.
Exactly. And I have to admit, looking at this chapter, I kind of felt like I was staring at the manual for a supercomputer.
Oh, totally. All those diagrams and technical terms, it can feel a bit overwhelming at first. But you know what? It's like any good manual. Once you start breaking it down, it's actually pretty amazing how elegantly it all works.
Okay, so big picture first. We're talking about two main parts here. The central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system.
Right. Think of it this way. You've got your central command center, that's your brain and spinal cord. The central nervous system, it's constantly processing information, making decisions, keeping everything running smoothly.
And the peripheral nervous system is like all the communication lines going in and out of that central command, right?
Yeah.
Carrying messages from your brain to your toes and everywhere in between.
Exactly. It's what allows you to experience the world around you. Like right now, it's letting you feel the chair you're sitting on, hear the words I'm saying.
Wow, yeah. I never think about that, but it's all thanks to my peripheral nervous system. Pretty cool. But hold on a second. Things just got a whole lot more interesting when I saw this section on the enteric nervous system, or ENS.
The ENS. Ah, yes. The second brain, as some people call it.
You mean my gut? Like literally my stomach has its own nervous system.
It does. It's a network of millions of neurons, as many as you'd find in your spinal cord. And yeah, it's mainly focused on digestion and all that fun stuff.
Okay, but still, a second brain. Mind officially blown.
And the really wild part, the ENS can operate independently, but it's also in constant communication with your central nervous system.
Whoa, wait. So my gut is sending messages to my brain. Like what kind of messages are we even talking about? Is it telling me what kind of pizza to order?
Haha, not quite. But those butterflies you get when you're nervous, or that gut feeling that something's off, that's actually your ENS sending signals to your brain. It's a two-way street of communication between your head and your gut.
So you're telling me those butterflies in my stomach are more than just a figure of speech?
Exactly. Your gut is way more in tune with your emotions than you might think.
Man, I'm never underestimating my gut again.
Don't! Researchers are still uncovering all its secrets. It's a fascinating area of research.
This is already blowing my mind, and we're just getting started. So we've got this intricate network, but what are the actual building blocks of this whole system?
Ah, you mean those tiny messengers that make it all possible? We're talking about neurons.
Neurons, yes. They're like the stars of the show, right? Those tiny messengers zipping signals all over the place.
They are. And just like the stars, they're more complex than they seem.
They are. And just like the stars, they're more complex than they seem.
So let's zoom in on one of these neurons. What are we looking at here? Well, each neuron is like its own little information processing unit with a specific structure that allows it to do its job.
Okay, so walk me through it. What are the different parts?
So picture this. You've got the cell body, or soma, that's like the neuron's central hub.
Okay, the soma. Kind of like the main office.
Exactly. It's where the nucleus hangs out. That's the brain of the operation, along with all the other essential organelles that keep the neuron running smoothly.
Gotcha. So the soma is calling the shots, but it needs to get information from somewhere, right? That's where the dendrites come in.
You got it. Dendrites are like those branching arms reaching out from the soma, and their job is to pick up signals from other neurons.
So they're like little listening posts.
Exactly. Think of them like antennae, constantly tuned in, picking up messages from other neurons.
Okay. Makes sense. So the dendrites are receiving those messages, but how do they get passed along?
That's where the axon comes in. It's like a long cable that extends from the soma and carries the signal away to other neurons or even muscles and glands.
Like a high-speed information highway.
Perfect analogy. The axon is the superhighway for those electrical impulses.
So you've got the soma processing information, the dendrites receiving it, and the axon transmitting it. What a system. But I remember reading that not all neurons are the same, right? They're different types.
You're right. Just like we have different types of transportation for different purposes, our nervous system has specialized neurons for different tasks.
Okay, so what are these specialized neurons all about?
Well, let's start with sensory neurons. These are like the reporters of your nervous system.
Reporters? How so?
They're the ones picking up information from the outside world, like the feeling of the sun on your skin or the smell of freshly baked bread.
So if I burn my tongue on hot coffee, It's my sensory neurons sending that message to my brain.
Exactly. They're the ones that allow us to experience the world through our senses. Then you've got motor neurons. These are the action heroes.
Action heroes. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the ones telling my muscles to move.
You got it. When you decide to reach for that cup of coffee, it's your motor neurons carrying the instructions from your brain to the muscles in your arm and hand.
Wow. And what about the neurons that connect everything together?
Those are the interneurons, kind of like the middle managers of the nervous system.
Middle managers, huh? Keeping everything organized.
They're the ones relaying messages between sensory and motor neurons, making sure the information is flowing smoothly and that everything is coordinated.
Wow, it's incredible how specialized these tiny cells are. But, I read that neurons aren't the only ones hard at work in our nervous system, right? What about glial cells? They're not just passive bystanders, are they?
You're right to bring those up. Glial cells are often overlooked, but they play a crucial supporting role in the nervous system.
Okay, so tell me more. What do these glial cells do? They sound like unsung heroes.
They really are. Think of them as the support crew for the neurons, making sure everything runs smoothly. They provide nutrients, insulation, and even help clean up waste products.
They really are. Think of them as the support crew for the neurons, making sure everything runs smoothly. They provide nutrients, insulation, and even help clean up waste products.
Exactly. They're like the stage crew for the nervous system, working behind the scenes to make sure the show goes on.
I love that analogy. So we've got these amazing neurons supported by their glial cell crew. But how do they actually communicate? It's not like they're sending text messages, right?
Well, not exactly text messages, but
Right.
they do have their own language, a language of electrical impulses called action potentials.
Action potential. So it's like their own little Morse code.
Sort of. It's how neurons send those rapid-fire messages throughout your body.
Okay, so how does that work? How does a neuron actually create an action potential?
It all starts with a change in the neuron's membrane potential.
Membrane potential. Sounds complicated.
It's not as complex as it sounds. Think of it as the difference in electrical charge between the inside and outside of the neuron. When a neuron is at rest, it's a bit like a tiny battery with a slightly negative charge inside compared to the outside.
Okay, so it's primed and ready to go. What happens next?
Well, when a neuron receives a strong enough signal from other neurons, and remember, a single neuron can be getting input from thousands of others.
Thousands. Wow. Okay, so it's getting all this input. Then what?
Right. So when the signal is strong enough, it triggers special channels on the neuron's membrane to open. These channels control the flow of ions like sodium and potassium in and out of the neuron. And it's that movement of ions that generates the electrical current of the action potential.
So it's like flipping a switch.
Kind of. First, sodium channels open up, and sodium ions rush into the neuron, making the inside more positive. That's called depolarization.
So the charge inside flips from negative to positive. That's the action potential firing off.
Exactly. And then, to reset the system, so to speak, potassium channels open up and potassium ions flow out, returning the neuron to its resting state.
That's the repolarization phase, like recharging the battery.
Exactly. And here's the really interesting part. It's an all-or-nothing event.
All or nothing. What does that mean?
It means a neuron either fires a full-strength action potential or it doesn't fire at all. There's no in-between. Like flipping a light switch, it's on or off.
That makes sense. So no dimmer switch on these neurons.
Nope, full power or nothing. And once that signal starts, it races down the axon like a spark traveling along a fuse.
Okay, so the signal is speeding down the axon, insulated by that myelin sheath we talked about earlier, heading towards the axon terminal. But then what? How does the message jump to the next neuron?
That's where synapses come in.
Right, the synapse. It's like that tiny gap between two neurons where the message has to jump across. But the electrical signal can't just leap across that gap, can it?
You're right, it needs a little help. So when the action potential reaches the axon terminal, it triggers the release of chemical messengers called neurotransmitters.
Neurotransmitters. So we're switching from electrical signal to a chemical one.
Precisely. The neurotransmitters are released into the synapse and bind to receptors on the receiving neuron's dendrites.
Like a lock and key.
Exactly. Each neurotransmitter has a specific shape that fits into a specific receptor. And depending on the neurotransmitter and the receptor, this binding can either excite the receiving neuron, making it more likely to fire its own action potential, or inhibit it, making it less likely to fire.
So it's like a complex conversation happening at the synapse with some signal saying fire and others saying, hold your fire.
Exactly. And remember those neuromodulators we talked about earlier? They can fine-tune this entire process, influencing how strongly a neuron reacts to those neurotransmitters.
So it's like they're adjusting the volume on those messages.
A perfect way to put it. It's this incredible dance of signals, constantly changing and adapting, that allows us to process information, make decisions, and experience the world around us.
It's absolutely mind-blowing when you think about it. I mean, we started with a chapter from an anatomy book, and now I feel like we've been on this incredible journey through the intricate workings of our own brains. It really makes you appreciate the complexity hidden within each of us.
It really does. And the best part, we've only just scratched the surface. There is so much more to discover about the nervous system.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we're still unraveling the mysteries of this incredible system. For our listeners who want to go even deeper down the rabbit hole, we'll link to some additional resources in the show notes.
Absolutely. And a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those neurons firing.
And remember, stay curious.
College Cramcast.